How I received and rejected my first marriage proposal. Let me start this off by apologizing for any grammar mistakes. I don't have a good excuse. I just suck at my own frickin' language sometimes. So, I turned 16 exactly 3 weeks ago, but I have this weird habit of rounding out my age months before my birthday, meaning I've been saying I'm 16 for a few months now. I like to spend a lot of time at the local library. I'm homeschooled with 3 siblings, so it's pretty much my only chance I have to work in a quiet, neat place. About the beginning of this last summer, I noticed some guy was at the library every single time I was. At first, I thought nothing of it, as there's plenty of people I've noticed coming to the library regularly, but one day, I noticed something was way off. I finished all my schoolwork for the year, and was just dicking around playing games on one of the library computers, when I noticed the same guy sitting 2 computers down from me. I smiled and nodded at him, then continued my game. The internet on my computer started going off, however, so I switched over to the other side of the computer desk and logged onto that one. Lo and behold, creepy guy, who I'll refer to as CG from here on out, switched over to the other side as well, sitting right next to me and staring at my computer screen, as if I was blind and wouldn't notice. I immediately got a bad feeling about this. I scooted and texted my mom to tell her I'll be stopping by the pharmacy next door to pick up her prescriptions for her, just so I'd have an excuse to leave. Apparently though, CG wasn't done yet and followed me outside. He stopped me right outside the library and asked me for my name and how old I was. I told him, I'm 16 years old. He informs me that his name is Jonathan and that he is 46 years old. He then proceeds to tell me I'm one good-looking 16-year-old and walks away. This dude looks a stereotypical meth user as you can get. Scruffy beard, gel-spiked hair, dirty band t-shirts, and ripped-up cargo shorts, so I just figured he was your run-of-the-mill creep. The next day, I had a writers group meeting at the very same library, so I left my house and started walking for it. I'll spare you the tedious details, but around halfway through my walk, I noticed CG following behind me on a bike. I was creeped out, but I didn't want to seem crazy, and I simply chalked it up to him walking the same way as me. To be sure, I ended up taking 2 right turns, both of which he followed. I was officially bugged out, so I turned onto our town's main road, which led straight to the library. He followed me the entire 3/4 of a mile there. At some point I don't remember, I pulled up my phone and texted my girlfriend what was going on, and then called her until I got to the meeting. When I got to the meeting, I explained to the group leader what was going on, and she offered to drive me home afterwards. 2 hours later, and we leave to see CG still waiting outside the library, glaring at us all the way to the car. A few weeks went by without a CG encounter, so he was all but forgotten by me, until the day he proposed to me. I was walking home from the grocery store with some snacks when I noticed him sitting outside the laundromat I passed on my way home. I groaned internally and decided ignoring him was the best bet until he ran after me. I can't remember the word-for-word conversations, but it went something like this. Hey, how old are you? Still 16. I don't believe you. Now, I have no idea why I just didn't knock him out then and there, but I didn't, and instead, I pulled up my student ID and showed it to him. What he said next, I'll never forget. Oh shit. Well, are you emancipated? No. You should get emancipated. Why? Because then you can marry me. I promise I'll take care of you and our kids will be so cute. I booked it out of there, and after a couple more incidences of him following me around, he sort of dropped off the map. Until back in August, he cornered me in a gas station to demand to know why I act so scared around him and to stop doing that. I haven't heard or seen him since, but to this day, the idea of him freaks me the fuck out. Gym and the mall proposal I turned down. So a little background information first. When I was 20 years old and still living with my parents, I would carpool into the city where I went to university with my dad. Occasionally, my dad has to work late 11:30 p.m., midnight-ish. This was fine by me, as I'd hang out in the library or catch a late movie at the mall. On the night in question, I chose to see a late movie while waiting for my dad. The theater in this mall is never very busy. As a result, I had the place almost to myself, and the mall was relatively empty when I got out of the movie. I still had a bit to wait, and it was freezing outside, so I found an out-of-the-way bench inside to sit down on and took out my book to read. I was just getting into my book when this man in his 50s tapped me on the shoulder and asked me if a certain store was still open. This man was a bigger guy with gray hair and seemed a bit off. However, I attributed it to my own social anxiety and told him I wasn't sure, but I thought the store I was looking for was closed. Instead of going to check, he sat down on the other end of the bench and told me his name was Jim. Jim went on to say he didn't come downtown very often and tried to make small talk. He still seemed relatively harmless, and I figured he was just an overtly friendly and lonely man. So I put down my book and talked to him for a few minutes. Then he started to get overly weird. Jim tells me he prints flyers for his church for a living, and that he's not like the other men in the city who are dangerous and crazy. Jim then started to edge closer to me and ramble on about how pretty I am, how he had a big apartment all to himself, how he wished he had a pretty girl in his life like me, and could I move in with him? It wouldn't be anything sexual, he just wanted a pretty girl like me around. I am plenty freaked out by now, and edged away him, looking around for mall security, which is nowhere in sight. I told Jim that I had a boyfriend, and that he and my father, who was going to be there in a few seconds to pick me up, would not like that at all. At this point, Jim started to get a little upset. He said that since my boyfriend let me go to the mall by myself, he doesn't love and deserve me, and that my parents wouldn't miss me. Jim scooted even closer and rambled on that he loves me. He would take care of me better than my boyfriend does. I froze up at this point, and Jim, now way too close to me, gets on to rant that he wants to marry me. Would I marry him? And that it will make God happy if you marry me. God promised me a pretty wife like you. You're my reward for serving God, or something else equally creepy along those lines. I am completely panicked at this point, and could still not see mall security or anyone else for that matter. Jim went to put his hand on my thigh, and I jumped up stammering that I was sorry. I just got a text, and I needed to make sure it was not important. I then texted my boyfriend telling him to call me immediately. Luckily for me, he called me a few seconds later as I'm trying to mumble out a response that will keep the situation from escalating, as Jim was starting to stand up as well. I answered the phone and told Jim that it was my dad, and that he's here to pick me up. I stammered that I had to go, and while flattered, no, I was too young and all that to get married. I then booked out of the mall as Jim asked me if he can have my number, to which I responded, "No, sorry, bye," and then went back to talking on my phone, pretending that instead of my very confused boyfriend on the line, that it was my dad. I hid in a coffee shop down the street that still had plenty of people there, and proceeded to explain to my boyfriend what was going on. My boyfriend drove me to the university, and back for a month after that, and I never saw Jim again, fortunately. I'm engaged to my then-boyfriend now. Jim definitely will not be invited to the fucking wedding. A strange proposal. Sorry in advance for my bad English, but I'm not a native speaker. I came across this subreddit and thought about if any of my life experiences could fit here. When I remember what I'm about to tell, I almost felt sick and immediately felt assured it would indeed fit. So this happened back when I was a child, in a country of southern Europe. Though now I live in a different place. Back then, I lived with my parents in a small town, surrounded by beautiful and calm woods in the northern part of the country. The climate was not really Mediterranean. In fact, my town is just 30 kilometers away from one of the rainiest places in Europe. So, back to the story. It was a Sunday afternoon of April or May, I can't recall perfectly, and it rained mildly, not a surprise, in that geographic area. My friend and me thought, in our childish cluelessness, that it was a good idea to hide between the trees in the small park near the local church to throw pine cones against the cars which went by the road. We just guessed it'd be a fun way to spend an otherwise boring afternoon. The game started. Thinking back to it, I can't help smiling and realizing how stupid it all was, but whatever. We'd be careful to not hit the windshield because, pine cones are not that hard, but you can never be too sure you're not going to break the glass. However, I guess my friend was not having much fun, so he started to aim at them. I wasn't okay with it, so I just stopped throwing, screaming at him. I just ride my bike back home if he kept doing so. At the precise moment I pronounced those words, I heard a harsh noise which made me instantly feel uncomfortable. A car was slowing down, its blinker pointing to the right. And now? I just stopped because I simply wasn't able to express any sound. I didn't see my friend during those moments, but I could tell he couldn't move just like me. Really strange. We were frozen. Our games were about to stop, and our parents would beat the shit out of us, yeah. Meanwhile, the driver had parked the car, and now she, a woman, was opening the door. Then we saw her. She had this long, curly blonde hair and a pair of thick, thick glasses. Her face was, to put it bluntly, emotionless. She didn't seem mad at us or anything. She just looked determined to understand what happened, why we damaged her windshield, and how to settle an agreement, I guess. The fact that she was not yelling or something like that made me feel strange. It was like she was the first adult to approach me, guilty of something, without the intention to blame me. With hindsight, I think those facts alone were sufficient to put me on alert. But what can you do? She was only some meters from us now. It was raining heavily. Then she did something I will never ever forget. She put a fucking grin on her already creepy face. It looked like she was happy she had to deal with us. Happy we broke her windshield. She said something like, "Oh, that's bad. What do we do now? Got any ideas?" I felt my heart racing and looked at the direction of my friend. This is the funny part of the story. You must know my friend was kind of a sociopath, but definitely not in a negative way. He was not bad nor abnormal, he was just very, very manipulating. He could get his child's desires fulfilled by his parents just putting on a sad face and complaining about how sterile and unhappy was his existence. Obviously, he was a liar. Anyways, I realized my friend was sobbing quietly, but not that much. He needed her to feel sorry for him, I instantly thought. I felt somehow more peaceful and calm, because my friend was trying to put his shit together in a way I could not imitate. "Sorry, oh fuck, my mother will kill me," he continued sobbing, even pretending he wasn't able to talk without stuttering. "We were playing with a friend who was just on the other side of the road. He escaped. We didn't mean to hit you." She stared and continued to fucking smile. "Yeah, I saw him," she answered. Okay, now we're officially fucked. It was plain nonsense. There was no other friends. It was just the two of us. Why does she lie? Why pretending she saw this hypothetical friend? I turned to my friend and saw him panicking. He had stopped crying and didn't know what to answer. We just stood like that for, 50 seconds? No one was saying anything, and it was all very strange. My heart was racing again. Some cars went by the road while it kept raining. She was just fucking smiling, just smiling. Then she would blink her eyes in a very evident way. Don't know how to explain it. It wasn't natural at all. It was like she wanted us to understand that she was blinking, and if it wasn't spontaneous, well, it was just insane. Again, she could talk again. "I live in a town 5 kilometers away. Would you guys like to eat something at my place?" We simply didn't know what to answer. It was so damn strange. We felt something was just not okay. Why didn't she bring up the topic of her broken windshield, thankfully? My friend called on his courage and replied, although his courage was very stupid, "Are you for real? We'd love to." The woman blinked her eyes again without moving. "Sure, for real?" she said. 15-20 seconds passed and she was still staring at my friend with that stupid grin on her face. "For real? Maybe after the tea you could show me your panties." We got back our bikes running and rode them to the road. We did not look back, but probably she didn't even try to chase us. She probably had been smiling at the wet trees for all the time we rode. We went to my friend's home. We never saw that woman again. A stalker-ish marriage proposal. Before I start, I need to justify a few things, just as the way I acted and the thoughts that went through my head. I was still a child in every sense. I had not experienced anything on the creepy side of things firsthand. While I am a boy, I've been known to act like the cliché shy nerdy girls when I'm away from family or friends. At this time, anything that seemed even slightly dangerous sent me running for the hills, and while being aware of that can be useful, I tend to ignore it a bit too much. Anyways, so school had just finished, it was an early day, and I decided to head down to the nearby suburb where there was an amazing bunch of little shops along the beach. Being summertime, it was really quite an amazing day. Since I didn't actually live in the said suburb, I had to catch a bus home fine by me. When I got to the bus stop, the bus I was hoping to catch was driving away from the shop. No big deal. I could just wait 10 minutes for the next one, no harm done. However, about 5 minutes into the wait, I'm gonna guess a bunch of year 12 students, dressed in matching camo shirts and beige pants, walked past the stop. I knew they couldn't have been actual army men. Their hair would have had to have been growing for more than a year, but being the nervous and socially awkward geek I am, I tried shrinking away to be unnoticed. Unfortunately for me, this backfired heavily. One turned around and, on one knee, asked me to marry him. Obviously, I was astonished and secretly infuriated. I didn't even know them. As politely as I could, I rejected the proposal, and given the many years ago age gap, I disregarded it as a harmless prank. The process repeated for all the camo guys before they walked off. A few seconds later, the bus pulled into the bus bay. I was so relieved to be out of the awkward air. I was actually feeling faint. That faintness turned to sheer terror as the men from before hopped on the bus as well. Given that the bus was empty aside from the bus driver, the camo dudes, and myself, you can tell I was freaking out. The bus, I take stops at the mall before I stop. The guys were not hopping off at the mall. I couldn't take it anymore. I quickly thanked the driver and walked off the bus and got a heart attack when the man also hopped off. I was inside the mall for half an hour before I was confident I'd lost them. Thankfully, my house isn't far from the mall, so I ran at full pet back to my home. To this day, I hate those guys for ruining what was a previously amazing day. If any of you is reading this creepy camo man, then fuck you. I never want to see any of you for the rest of my life. The marriage proposal. I'm a 22-year-old female. 3 weeks ago, I went grocery shopping after work. I was halfway done and just needed to get some fruit before checking out. A man who was about 50 years old always seemed to be following me, of course. I didn't notice until he came up to me. He asked me if I wanted to get married to him. Of course, I was more stunned silence. He told me mad 100K a year, was very lonely, and told me I didn't ever have to work ever again. That I would just have to have sex with him and clean the house. He started to come closer and closer to me, and I started to walk backwards to avoid him. Then a huge black guy walked over, and he slipped his arm around him. He asked, "Baby, what is wrong?" And I replied, "Oh, nothing, I hope." And the 50-year-old guy went wide-eyed and ran off. The guy went off of me and told me his wife told him to go over and scare him off. The couple then seen that I got out of my car okay and reported him to the manager. I was very lucky for that man who saved me. An alarming proposal from a patient in love. I live in New York City, where there are plenty of weirdos to go around. When I used to live at my parents' house in Queens, I need to take this bus for 45 minutes to get to the nearest subway. This bus I needed went past a mental hospital, and an assisted living center, and an old folks' home, so there was always plenty of odd company. One day, when I was 16 years old, I got on the bus and it started to snow like crazy outside. Next, I noticed I didn't have my iPod, so I thought, great, a stranger is probably going to try and talk to me. At the next stop, coincidentally, the stop nearest to the mental institution, this guy gets on and sits right next to me. He didn't look homeless or smell bad or anything, but he had a huge dent in his head, and I could tell he wasn't totally with it. So now, I'm stuck on the bus with this guy. Basically, chatting me up for 30 plus minutes, and during the conversation, he asked me to marry him. To which I reply that I am already married because I'm a smart-ass teenager. He starts asking why I don't have a ring, where's my husband, etc. So I keep lying and lying and lying. Finally, I got to my bus stop and I disappeared into the train. Fast forward, I'm 23. I live in Brooklyn. I have a totally different look. I'm a hairdresser, so I really reinvent myself on a regular basis. Anyways, I get on the train one morning and I go to look at the subway map and some guy comes up behind me and asks if he can sit in the seat in front of the map. I ended up getting on that same train, but in a different car. I was just riding along when all of a sudden, the map seat guy comes into my car and comes up to me and says, "Hi, you might not remember me, but I asked you to marry me once." And I had to scramble to remember the weird lies I told him to get him to leave me alone when I was 16. He asked if he could sit with me, but I told him this was my stop, and I got off the train. He was never rude or lewd, but he just was still kind of, off. He made me really nervous. If you live in New York City or any other place with thousands of people taking mass transit, you know what the odds are of running into someone you know on the train. Also, I cannot stress how odd it was that this guy was able to recognize me. I've literally been inches from people I went to high school with on the train, and they haven't recognized me. Some people I've told this story to wonder if maybe he was an idiot savant or some sort of remembering faces. Indecent proposal. Unlike some of the other stories I've read on here, this takes place in broad daylight, with a large number of people around. However, like many other stories, it starts out with me walking home. I was around 13 years old and walking home from school. I live in a very big city with lots of people always out and about. On this particular day, the school year was winding down, and the nice weather was giving everyone a reason to really have fun, sit outside at restaurants, etc. I was about 1 or 2 blocks from home when I was passing through a busy avenue, and I noticed someone yelling from across the streets. It appeared to be an old man yelling and hollering at other people in what appeared to be a playful manner. Perhaps he knew some of the people on my side of the street, or he was just a local personality that I was not aware of. I'm used to odd people in the street, and I just shrugged it off. I walked to the end of one corner and crossed the street. I only focused on the light and didn't really care to look around, making sure no traffic was going to hit me. When I got to the other side of the street, the crazy old man was right in front of me. He smelled. I could not tell whether it was body odor, halitosis, or both, but he looked right at me and asked, "Will you give me a spanking?" I probably spent a half second in shock and immediately hit the fight or flight response and completely rushed away from him and towards my house, never looking back. I don't know whether I was singled out or he was just doing that to everyone on the street. I think it was the latter. Apparently, I was only worth a tenner. I laugh about it now, safely 12 years in the future from when it happened. But at the time, I could have been really serious. So, I'm in the bars for the first time ever as a young whippersnapper at the unruly age of 17. I was out with a few guys from the office. As a young lad who couldn't manage his beer, I was missing a lot of drinks together, and it started to become a deadly cocktail, leaving an inexperienced binge drinker in serious trouble. So, we'll skip past the part where I found semi-conscious in the toilets at the nightclub and was yawned by the eviction, and resume this story where I am outside the club in the darkness and bitter cold, with barely any functioning senses. This was pre-mobile days, so I didn't really have any way to tell my friends inside that I had been kicked out, which probably saved my embarrassment. So, I came to the conclusion that my night was over, so in a blur of dreamlike haze, I started stumbling off to go and find a taxi to go home. As I got walking, I became aware of the fact that I was talking to someone, this older gentleman. He was very polite and telling me where he was from and various other stuff. I was having a nice conversation, telling him how I'd been out, etc. At this point, my alcohol-fueled 17-year-old self was completely oblivious to what was actually going on. That was until He started offering me 10 pounds. That's about $14 at this point. Something woke up inside my head, and my wary brain was resurrected. I looked ahead and noticed that we were walking to a dark marketplace, and we were now alone, far, far away from the other pubs and the other revelers. I suddenly realized and woke up from a start, and realized that actually it was in a bit of a situation here. So what's best to do? Well, like a nice British person, I politely declined his proposal. I stopped walking. My would-be rapist then upped his offer to 20 and affirmed that he wouldn't hurt me, but it was enough. This asshole wasn't for sale that night, or any other night, so I just ran and ran and ran and ran, all the way home, all 14 miles home. As I was fully sobering up, it really did hit me quite how lucky I was. If he had just grabbed me, there was probably nothing I could have done about it. Very, very lucky.